Thank you, Dr. Chapman. Thank you to the WSOA for the opportunity to speak on this critical topic in our field.
And sorry, I forgot to mention you're a UW resident in orthopedic surgery. So congratulations on being in that great program. I apologize for interrupting you. I forgot that. So carry on.
Thank you. So orthopedic surgery is not diverse. I realized this the first time I walked into orthopedic surgery practice as a high schooler in Houston. It didn't look like my pediatrician's offices, didn't look like the hospital that my parents worked at. All the doctors' photos on the wall were all male and all white. It was weird, and I wanted to know why, but I couldn't get any satisfactory answer from one of the surgeons that I asked. A few summers later in college, I took part in a summer research program at ND Anderson Cancer Center, where I got randomly assigned to a mentor, Dr. Valerie Lewis, who is the chair of the Department of Orthopedic Oncology and also happens to be the first and only Black female chair of an orthopedic department. I loved every second of that summer shadowing in the OR and clinic. I actually saw orthopedic surgeons that looked different from each other and saw their unique styles of connecting with patients. By the end of the summer, I was convinced that there wasn't any more exciting job out there. If it wasn't for simply seeing someone that looked like me, as well as receiving mentorship by multiple surgeons, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. This is not the common case for most female, Black, and brown medical students, though. The current makeup of orthopedics in the US is nowhere close to being proportional to our country's population. Underrepresented racial minorities, or URM, includes Black, Latino, and Native Americans. It doesn't include Asians or whites. They make up 32% of the US population, but only 9.8% of orthopedic residents, and only 3.6% of all practicing orthopedic surgeons. This graph breaks this down by race ethnicity. The blue bar is the percentage of the US population, and the gray is orthopedic residents. The yellow is AAOS membership. For women, we make up half the population in the US and are 16% of orthopedic residents and only 6% of practicing surgeons. So here's how orthopedics compares to our fellow medical specialties in residency. For race, we're pretty close to ranking last, and for gender, we are ranked dead last. Even urology has almost double our percentage of women. And as I said, even as a high schooler, it was pretty obvious how poorly representative orthopedics was. And in medical school, there are the classic stereotypes about ortho, as evidenced by this popular meme. Among fellow female students and Black and brown students, there's a well-known wariness about rotating on orthopedics, given stories of prior URM students' poor experiences of the field being non-inclusive sometimes. So what? Why is this a problem? Other than the inherent problem of making people feel like they don't belong. There's a large field of research on diversity in teams, largely led by the business field, but also in the wider medical community, and more recently gaining traction in orthopedics, that has found a vast number of benefits in prioritizing diversity. 1, patient outcomes improve when care is provided by a more diverse team. Patients with race concordant doctors report that they're better able to participate in decision-making. Financial performance of the practice improves with increased diversity. Minority physicians currently provide more care to the underserved, which can help in reducing healthcare disparities. And there are wide orthopedic disparities in race and gender for joint replacement, fracture care, and spine surgery. Non-minority trainees report that racial diversity enhances their education. A few studies have shown that white male students are better able to interact with female and minority patients when they come from a medical school that has a more diverse student body, which increases quality of care and patient satisfaction. And diversity enhances interest in the profession among underrepresented minority and female students. Most importantly, with the increasing number of URM and women in medical school, we have to remove the barriers for them to enter the field if we want to continue to attract the most qualified medical students. We simply cannot remain competitive as a specialty by systematically excluding talented students who don't fit society's stereotypes of who should be an orthopedic surgeon. Our field has been operating at a low potential this whole time. Yes, we've had great advances in orthopedic care, but imagine where we could be and where our patients could be if we had the brightest minds out of everyone enter into our field. So why is there this discrepancy? I came across this article by Dr. Henry Mencken, written in 1999 in Core, titled Diversity in Orthopedics, that offered some of the commonly heard reasons by his colleagues at the time, which he goes on to refute in the article. Women are not strong enough to do a man's job. Working with women makes male surgeons nervous and is distracting. More comfortable teaching their own people. Their values are different than ours, which may not be good for patients, or that there's not a good fit. We all know that these are unacceptable answers now, but it makes it obvious why there are such low percentages of URM and female students in orthopedics. So the two possible bottlenecks are either one, minorities are choosing to not go into orthopedics, or two, they're not being selected. So regarding gender, interestingly, the proportion of female medical students applying into orthopedics and those who become residents are the same. One study showed that there was no difference in ranking between female and male applicants in sex-blinded applications. So the discrepancy in the numbers is therefore in getting female medical students interested enough to apply. Another study found that half of all orthopedic applicants knew before medical school that they were interested in orthopedics. But by gender, only 15% of female students knew before, compared to 35% of male students. So female students are not getting as much early exposure as their male counterparts. The same is not true about race. A recent study out of CHLA found that race, but not gender, is associated with the odds of acceptance into orthopedic residency. Asian, Black, Hispanic, and other racial minorities have lower odds of admission into an orthopedic residency than white applicants, independent of academic metrics. While the percentage of women in orthopedics has been very slowly increasing over the last 50 years, the percentage of underrepresented racial minorities are actually decreasing, over 30% in the last 10 years. As is common in many initiatives across disciplines, the focus of increasing diversity usually starts with gender. There's a study out of Mississippi recently that surveyed 75 orthopedic residency programs on their perceived barriers, specifically to racial diversity. And 32% of them actually stated that they were not trying to recruit minority residents. A few others stated the last minority residents that matriculated through our program did not perform well. And one even said that key faculty within the department would be against a change in the cultural and or racial makeup of the orthopedic residents. What are the barriers? Number one, a lack of diversity in the field. They have to see surgeons that look like them. Two is a lack of mentors or early exposure in orthopedics. It's difficult to get a mentor when you don't have connections. There are neighborhoods and communities that don't have any orthopedic surgeons that come from there, and those students don't know how to get their foot in the door. As opposed to more privileged students whose dad's friend is an orthopedic surgeon or who's in the same church as some orthopedic surgeons, they can easily shadow or find a mentor. And there are many socioeconomic barriers. And for female students particularly, there's a stereotype that you must be excessively strong. There's a perception that the lifestyle is bad. Orthopedics has a jock or a bro culture where they wouldn't fit in. And there's a perception of a hostile work environment. Many think that orthopedics does not value diversity given the stories about sexist or racist remarks. A recently created account on Twitter and Instagram called Speak Up Ortho aims to increase awareness of bias and harassment in orthopedic surgery by sharing anonymous stories submitted by orthopedic surgeons. I encourage everyone to follow Speak Up Ortho to read these stories. Here's a few of them. I'll read the one in the middle. A few quotes by our male colleagues, program directors, and chairmen. There are two types of women in orthopedic surgery, those that shouldn't be orthopedists and those that shouldn't be women. And another, how's your vacation? Referring to my maternity leave. And I think you must have testicles because you aren't like the typical female physician, focused on their family and lazy. These events make the work environment a hostile place. While these kind of events hopefully are becoming less common with time, microaggressions occur many times throughout the day, every day. Microaggressions are brief, everyday exchanges that send denigrating messages to a marginalized group. They're indirect, subtle, or unintentional statements or incidents that stem from implicit bias. A survey study published at JAOS showed that over 92% of female orthopedic surgeons and residents reported experiencing microaggressions. Here are a few common ones that I and fellow co-residents have experienced. Assuming that a female doctor is a nurse, or assuming that a Black or brown doctor is a janitor. There's been a few times where I've walked into patient rooms and I get told coffee orders before I can even say hello. Not stocking small glove sizes in the ORs. Assuming that when a female student comes to your clinic that they're not for orthopedics, but for some other specialty. Referring to female doctors by their first name, but calling white male doctors doctor and their name. The emergency department asking male interns their opinion over the female consult resident. Refusing to even attempt to pronounce a foreign sounding name instead of asking how it's pronounced. Saying, you speak English well, unprompted. And ignoring certain students when you're teaching, like not giving eye contact. And here's a few problematic statements during interviews that myself and a few of my co-residents have experienced. Oh yeah, I had a female co-resident in my residency. She was actually pretty good. Do Indians even experience racism? We only take female residents who played team sports. Why aren't you going into OBGYN? One recent interesting article by Dr. Ann Van Heest out of Minnesota discusses the concept of a 30% rule taken from corporate science studies. that 30% is the critical mass needed to self-sustain diversity in an organization. So instead of having a token woman or a Black colleague, having at least 30 to 50% women and people of color will create an inclusive culture that fosters success and encourages more URM to join the organization. How long will it take us to reach gender parity in our field in the US? A study 2 months ago projected it will take 326 years to reach parity with the US population at a constant growth rate of 2%, which is the current growth rate right now. So what can we do to achieve a more balanced workforce in our field? There's multiple ways that residencies and practices should work towards this, as well as many ways that we individually should prioritize this effort. One, we have to establish the achievement of diversity as a goal, take initiatives to introduce our field to young people, join groups with a focus in exposing orthopedics to those who are underrepresented, be proactive in mentorship, and increase your knowledge of microaggressions and implicit bias. So I'll start with the first one. We have to establish the achievement of diversity as a goal in our practices and our departments. Put this in your mission statement, verbalize your support of diversity, and discuss how to achieve this goal regularly. Offer bonuses to others on their work and promote a URM and women in your practice, and put women in URM in leadership positions. Next, we have to take initiatives to introduce our field to young people. Some ideas that you can do in your local community are hosting a Sawbones workshop to the local Girl Scout troop or girls soccer team, or you can give a talk to high school classes about orthopedics, and specifically seek out the schools with a larger proportion of Black and Brown students. Studies have shown that these outreach workshops actually do increase interest in our field. Be active and follow groups that do the work of introducing people of color and women to orthopedics. The Ruth Jackson Orthopedic Society, the Gladden Society, and Black Women Orthopedic Surgeons all host webinars. The Perry Initiative and Nth Dimensions are pipeline programs that offer workshops and events for high school, college, and medical students, which we can all support. Be proactive in becoming a mentor. Encourage female and underrepresented racial minority students to shadow you in the OR and clinic. Go out of your way to ask them. Give them your contact information and days you're available. Don't wait for them to find and ask you. There's already so many barriers. And one of the most important things you can do is to including for the benefit of our patients, is to continually educate ourselves on implicit bias and microaggressions. Hearing people's stories and experiences, reading books about it, following leaders in the field of health equity on social media accounts, or watching webinars. There's a podcast called She Can Fix It by Dr. Alana Munger out of Yale Orthopaedics that interviews female orthopedic surgeons on their life and their career. Everyone should listen especially to the episode of the podcast featuring Dr. Claudia Thomas, who is the first Black female orthopedic surgeon in the country. Additionally, we all must call out intolerant comments or jokes from colleagues and from our patients. I came across this graphic that visually shows how to progress to becoming an advocate for diversity. We all know people who are apathetic about this topic and some who are aware but not active. We all have to aim to become first active and then an advocate for diversity. So while some of us are currently in the aware stage, taking some of the above steps will push us into the next stages. Becoming an advocate means that you're committed routinely and you are proactive to championing inclusion. Additionally, becoming an advocate will attract URM to your practice, even if your practice itself is not diverse yet. So although really to make more efficient change, there needs to be some sweeping rule changes in leadership and hiring to compensate for the barriers. These are some examples of some minor actions that we can all take. In summary, orthopedics has been nowhere close to operating at its highest potential. We have to take it upon ourselves to welcome those who feel like they don't belong in order to have the best and brightest minds in our specialty for our patients. Thank you.
Pooja, thank you. All of us are applauding you. Thank you for speaking up, raising our awareness so that we hopefully emerge in your 4-phase projection from the state of apathy to at least awareness, thanks to your lecture, and hopefully become active and then advocates on an active basis. I'll invite my fellow board members to maybe speak up as well, but I just bow my head in front of you and thank you for your outspokenness and education.
So I'll speak up. So first of all, you probably know this, but the first female president of the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons was Christy Weber about 4 years ago. I can't believe that it was in this this last decade that we finally got a female president, and she took no hesitancy in bringing this whole issue up in her acceptance speech at the Academy meeting. You probably want to pull that and listen to it because it was really good. She is already trying to raise this awareness. Also, not to brag on my specialty society, but the Pediatric Orthopedic Society has become much more diverse, particularly when it comes to getting women involved over the last 20 years, which is cool. I don't know if there's a model that POSNA has put together that can be applied more broadly, but there has to be a way we can fix this. Somebody pointed out during your talk, you're talking to a bunch of white men right now, and you did great doing it. And I so appreciate what you're doing, and I so support what you're trying to do.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, just speaking out my own specialty, I've been in practice for 30 years, and I've had 3 female spine fellows, and I am in continued contact with all of them, but I feel I failed to kind of increase the female role in spine surgery. It's still an extremely male specialty, and in terms of diversity, in terms of race, I hope it's making some progress there. But I was wondering if you could address something that I've seen with female surgical residents and fellows, and that is that it's not just the fellow physicians who can offer microaggressions. It can be the OR environment, like female nurses or so. Is that still a reality that you personally experience?
Oh, definitely. It's yeah, I wouldn't even say it's like, you know, within just our field, orthopedics. Like it happens from literally everyone. I'd say like patients every day for sure, OR staff, nurses, our own residents, fellows, attendings. Like it's just kind of everywhere.
Let me ask you a very naive question. Educate me. If I see this happening with a female trainee in the OR, should I speak out, or what advice would you give me in terms of what can I do personally to kind of not let this just taciturnly slide by?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely feel supported when, I mean, it's happened before where like a microaggression happens and one of my attendings or fellows like speaks up and says, hey, like, that's not appropriate, or like, this is why you shouldn't say that, or like, what did you mean by that? Because it then doesn't have to fall on me to be the one to always kind of, you know, and not that I always even address it, but it kind of becomes a burden. So when someone else notices it, it just makes like the whole environment more supportive, and people know that they can't just get away with saying things like that.
Great.
If you look in the chat box, Mia Hagen just wrote about the web-based exam for the ABOS required reading, which is an AOA essay on leadership, communication, and negotiation across a diverse workforce by Dennis Clohissy. And it's a really good article. And I was thinking about it when you were talking, Pooja, because there are many things that you talked about that were relevant to it and pertinent. If you want to bring women into the workforce, you got to start at the bottom, and going to Girl Scout troops and showing them bones is a good way to do it. That's starting at the very bottom of the educational ladder.
Yeah, I mean, I just, you know, offered that because from my own experience, I was interested in orthopedics very early on. So I think even just getting that interest early on is great, because not all female medical students are interested in orthopedics. But I think if I hadn't gotten that early exposure, I don't even think I would have applied to medical school. Like I applied to medical school to be an orthopedic surgeon. So I think we should start getting that interest in earlier than medical school.
John, if I may call you out, thank you for joining us tonight. You had a very successful recruitment of a female orthopedic surgeon who's recently presented. Did you run into difficulties by colleagues about hiring a female orthopedic surgeon?
Oh yeah, and it was the usual stuff that's been mentioned about what if she has to go out on maternity leave and all this other stuff that, and actually she's probably one of the most intelligent and thoughtful associates I have by far. So was happy to go to bat, and I just want to have a shirt that says "I told you so," you know, and I go to work now. I do have one little vignette from today. One of the surgical techs I work with told me that her daughter, who was a patient years ago, is 4 years old now. She wants to be an orthopedic surgeon. So her mom pointed to her leg and said, "What is this?" "The tibia." And it's the 4-year-old telling her this, and she pointed to the upper part of her leg. And she said, what's this? She said the femoris, which probably was the real name of the femur at one time. So this 4-year-old girl wants to be an orthopedic surgeon. So I invited her to come to the office and we can play with bones and that kind of stuff. And it was very gratifying that somebody so young was interested. So regardless of gender, I thought your talk was just tremendous. I wish everybody could hear it. Thank you very much.
So Pooja, thank you so much. We need to come to a close. We really all thank all the speakers, and Nick, great program. Thanks for putting this together. Alan, thank you, and Sean. But Pooja, please be prepared to be asked to speak again at our annual meeting. Probably this is so important, and we need to spread the message. And we at SSF will do our best as well. We really appreciate your work and your insights and your education also. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr.